Hi there, I'm Kate McClellan, and I've been a professional wedding planner for over 20 years now. I started Planning Collective when I noticed that though most couples are super excited about getting engaged, they quickly feel overwhelmed and intimidated by the actual process of planning their weddings. If left unchecked, this can lead to massive burnout and the urge to scrap all your plans and just elope. While this is totally normal, you don't have to sacrifice your sanity for your dream wedding. In the Wedding Planning Collective podcast, I'm going to share the processes, tips, and tools that all engaged couples like you need to feel confident, supported, and excited about your wedding plans again. Let's get started. Hey there, before we get to the episode, I have a quick question for you. Have you been unsuccessfully trying to shake that feeling that you're forgetting something when it comes to your wedding? You've got the Knot app and you've downloaded countless other planning checklists, but you just can't get rid of that sneaking suspicion that there's something you don't know yet. It's a very common feeling when it comes to wedding planning. So much so that I decided to put together a free resource to help get rid of what I call FOWO, the fear of wedding oversight. Yes, it does include that 12-month task checklist, but that's just the start. In addition to the ultimate wedding planning checklist, my new Don't Forget list also includes a wedding vendor checklist, your shopping list, a packing list for the wedding weekend, and a complete wedding item setup list to make sure that you are truly not forgetting anything when it comes to your wedding. And you heard me right, this list is free for you to grab right now. Just head over to planningcollective.com/forgetting and it's all yours. That's planningcollective.com/FORGETTING, and let's get rid of that FOWO together. All right, let's get on to the episode. Hey guys, Kate here. Welcome back to another episode of the Wedding Planning Collective podcast. Last weekend, I was at a friend's house. We were celebrating her husband's birthday, and her sister was there, and she had just recently gotten engaged. We hadn't seen each other in a long time, so of course we grabbed a bottle of wine and found ourselves a little corner in the party and started talking about wedding plans. When I asked her to fill me in on what they already have done so far and where she's at, she said they were just about to book a venue and all they needed to do was decide which of the open dates that they wanted to go with for that specific venue. Then she asked me the question that I could just feel in my bones was coming. She had previously told me that the food and beverage minimum at this venue was $12,000. So she wanted to know how much they should plan for everything else. Now, on the surface, that is a totally logical question, right? And I knew a version of that question was coming my way because it is such a common question. So many couples find themselves in this position where they have booked the venue and then they think, now what? Some similar versions of this question that I hear all the time are, we're having 150 guests. How much should we spend on flowers? Or how much is catering supposed to cost for about 100 guests? And every single day on a Reddit or a Facebook group, I see some version of how much are you guys spending on a DJ, photographer, coordinator, fill in the blank. It's a question that seems innocent enough, but it's actually a big red flag that a lot of couples are planning their weddings backwards. And absolutely no shame on you if you have asked this question before or if you were thinking the same thing. It is so common. And it's exactly why I created this podcast and the wedding planning blueprint. Most couples have not done this before. So how would you know to do anything different? So let's dive in. Well, it is totally normal to crowdsource for ideas and make sure that you're on the right track as far as pricing benchmarks go. Here's the real problem with asking these questions in random groups. When you start planning by asking what other people are spending, you're letting their wedding determine your budget, not your actual financial situation or your priorities. And that is the easiest way to blow your budget before you've even started. So let's talk about the core mistake behind all of this for just a second. This kind of backward planning is actually what causes so many couples to feel overwhelmed and behind. And most of the time, it's not about being bad at budgeting. It's that the tools that you see most commonly online are setting you up to plan backwards. Because the real truth is, you can't build a smart budget without knowing what your big picture number is first. You can't prioritize if you don't know what matters the most to you. And you can't plan confidently if you're constantly guessing what's normal or what should we be spending? And this is why the question that my friend's sister asked told me that she was about to make the same massive mistake that I have seen couples make over and over again. They're about to sign a contract with a venue without knowing what that really means for the rest of their budget or the rest of their plans. In my opinion, asking these questions, especially if you're asking them online, is very similar to, let's say you're buying a house and you were to ask a group on the internet, how much are you putting down for your house? Or how much did you spend for a 1,500 square foot property or house? Or even how much did you spend on the inspection? Well, these are all very important questions, and their answers might help you get a little bit of perspective. You can't rely on what averages are or what somebody on the internet is telling you they spent on a house or a DJ, because there's going to be so many different variables that impact what kind of house you're looking for or what kind of DJ you're looking for. Of course, the biggest variable is traditionally what area you're in. Here in Michigan, our averages are going to be much lower than if you're in, say, New York City or California and LA. But there's also a ton of hidden variables that come into play when it comes to your wedding. And it's important to know what those variables or priorities are prior to booking anything. Okay, that sounds great, but what should you be doing instead, right? Well, those tools that you can find on sites like Zola or The Knot, they are a great place to start. I really do recommend those sites. I might talk bad about them in some context, but when it comes to the beginning phases of your planning, breaking down your budget or looking for vendors, they really can be helpful. But that is just a first step. So here's what I recommend as I'm talking my clients through the budgeting and priority process. There's no getting around it. You have to get your big picture number first. When I say big picture number, I mean, what is the overall cost or overall dollar amount that you want to be spending on the entire wedding? Now, people will define this a little bit differently. Some couples will include the rehearsal dinner, if you're doing a post-wedding brunch, the honeymoon, the dress. All of it is in that bubble that needs to be covered by that big picture number. Some couples don't include things like the rehearsal dinner or the honeymoon. Those are budgeted separately. Either way, you need to know what your big picture number is and what it's going to include so you are not missing a huge component of the wedding cost. Before you can determine how much to spend on flowers, how much your DJ should cost, or what venues you're looking at, you absolutely need to have this big picture number. It can be a range. It doesn't have to be like down to the penny exactly this number, but it needs to be something that you feel comfortable knowing that you have the funds to cover that, whatever that means to you. Typically, this does mean you're going to have honest conversations with anyone that might be contributing. Most commonly, of course, the parents of the couple are the ones that might be chipping in. So whether it's parents on both sides or family on both sides, maybe it is solely something that the two of you are paying for the wedding, or you have others that are contributing. Whoever your people are that are going to be helping contribute to the wedding, you need to have an honest conversation with them before anything is booked. And I know it can feel so awkward. We are all trained from such a young age talking about money is rude, at least most of us. Some people, it's absolutely fine to have these conversations. But more often than not, I see couples get stuck here because it can feel awkward asking for money, right? Or you might feel like you're greedy if you're wanting to get like what an actual number is. Another speed bump that some couples hit is that they get vague answers from family, like, oh, don't worry, we've got something set aside, or just keep us posted and we'll let you know if it goes too high. Or, something that's just very general that's not giving you like a specific number. And while I know, again, this is out of either uncomfortableness or just not wanting to have that direct conversation, and people usually have the best of intentions when they're saying something like this, it can lead to massive misunderstandings down the road. And when the final bills are due, if there is this sticker shock that somebody wasn't expecting it to be as high as it was, everyone's now in a panic, or worse yet, the problem is if you don't figure out that you're on different pages before you start booking things, it's going to be really awkward down the road when you're asking for help with final payments and it is way beyond what they had expected. So, as awkward as it can be, it is really important to avoid the panic as the wedding gets closer and the possibility that you might not be able to pay off the final balances. If you know you're headed into an either awkward conversation or your family is being particularly vague or maybe they're uncomfortable about talking about money, make sure to approach the conversation in a way that's going to make things easier for them, make them feel more comfortable. So a lot of times it will be, talking to your parents individually or separately rather than making it like a big wedding discussion that you have with everyone involved. A lot of times families are just still getting to know each other in the wedding planning phase. So talking about money in front of others can make it really awkward. That may or may not include your fiance. Maybe this is something that you want to sit down with your parents or your family one on one. Maybe you want to include your fiance. Every family is different, but think about the reality of what's going to make them feel most comfortable to have this potentially awkward conversation. And I think most importantly, let them know in advance that you want to have a conversation with them, not just about the wedding, but specifically the wedding budget. So they aren't caught off guard and everyone has time to prepare for the conversation. They may need to have some time to prep and take a look at what they're able to comfortably contribute. So, not putting them on the spot and giving them some time to look into this will be very helpful. And if you're still having a really hard time getting them to give you an estimate or a range, like a range is fine. So, if they say we're looking between this amount and this amount, that's absolutely fine. Before you commit to anything, so before you book the venue, before you book any of your vendors, put together an estimate of what you anticipate the wedding that you're looking to have would cost. That way, you present them with a number, again, whether it's a range or a specific number, you present that with them, ask them if they're comfortable with it, and if they are, move forward and book those vendors. But that way, you know that everyone is on the same page before you start moving forward with booking your vendors. A quick caveat though to this last method, I really don't recommend going this route unless it's absolutely necessary. I have done this with a couple clients in the past. Most of the time, it's when we know that we have a healthy budget that we're working with. We just want to fine tune or kind of narrow it down a little bit. And I say that because as you're doing the research and you are getting the estimates and you're pulling things together, you're likely going to start planning your dream wedding, right? You're going to reach out to the vendors you really want to work with. You're going to reach out to the venue that you would love to be at. And then you're falling in love with this wedding, right? You're really picturing yourselves in it, and this is going to be your wedding. But if you find out that it is way outside of the comfort zone as far as the budget goes, it can be so heartbreaking. So you're taking a massive risk that this wedding is not going to happen. And then it can be really hard to be happy with the wedding that you end up having. I have seen it happen a couple of times. That's why I really don't recommend it. If you have your heart set on something and then you can't get it, it can be really devastating. If you never thought that that was an option to begin with, then the other wedding is going to look beautiful and gorgeous for you. Say this with a word of caution, but it can be a way to work with families that are particularly quiet about wanting to give you a number. Ultimately, though, what I want to make sure that you take away from this is that you must have a solid understanding of what that big picture number or range is before you do anything else wedding related, before you do the site visits, before you start reaching out to vendors, and yes, before you start doing dress shopping. I know it's hard and it's no fun, and I'm like the Debbie Downer of the party, right? Because you want to start with the fun stuff, but you are not going to regret having a solid understanding of your budget and what you have to spend for your wedding before you start spending. Once you have this big picture number, now it's time to start allocating that into the different categories for your wedding. And this is where those budget tools on the apps like Knot and Zola can be really helpful. They can give you a starting point. So plug in that big picture number, and then it will help break them down by percentage across the various categories. Now, remember, these are averages. So the way that these algorithms work for these tools is that it takes the average. I believe most of them do also take into account the region that you're in now. So as long as you're letting it know what area you're based in, it will adjust it based on that. Now, just like all averages, there are some that are way above and there are some that are way below what this average number is. How do you know what you need to have in that different category? But remember that this is just the first step in breaking down your budget because every wedding is different. Every couple's priorities are different. And that means every couple's allocation or breakdown of their budget is also going to be different. So after you get this general breakdown, one of the most important steps is actually the step that most couples will gloss over or ignore completely, is to customize this breakdown based on your priorities. This is where you're going to make sure that you're giving yourself enough room in the areas that are so important to the two of you, so you're not left disappointed because you're not able to afford them, or worse yet, way over budget. And in fact, this was actually the stage that my friend's sister was about to totally skip right over. After she asked me how much they should anticipate to spend on everything else, I asked if they put together a wedding budget yet. She let me know that they had plugged in $25,000 in the Knots app, so they knew they were on track with the venue since it said that it should be between 40 and 50%. And remember, the food and beverage minimum was $12,000 for that venue they were looking at. I asked if they had put together a budget yet, and she had said that they had used the Knot app to kind of break down what they thought their budget should be. She said that they had put in $25,000 for the big picture number. I'm hoping that they had talked about that with their family, but we didn't really get into those specifics. But when they put in that $25,000 into the app, it said that their venue should be between 40 and 50% of their overall cost. So they were right on track with a $12,000 food and beverage minimum, right? Now, at this point, I'm going to pause a little bit because we're talking about wedding priorities and creating your budget. But we could take this conversation in a different direction. But again, for the sake of this podcast, I'm going to skip over the hidden costs in venues and catering because we did just cover that in episode 136. However, this is an extremely important detail that I don't want you to skip over. So if you haven't listened to episode 136 and you haven't booked your venue or your caterer, make sure that you go and listen to that episode. You will not regret it. The TLDR of it all for this episode is that most couples will discover that the true food and beverage minimum that they're going to end up paying is at least 25% higher than the actual amount that they give you. So that 12,000 number that the venue had given them, almost guaranteed it's going to be at least 25% above what that line item is. So again, episode 136, make sure you go and listen to that, and I get more into detail about what that's all about. Okay, back to what we're talking about today, though, and that's planning things out of order. So the key stage that my friend's sister was about to skip was breaking down the budget based on their priorities. When I asked her what the Knot app said about the rest of her budget breakdown, she admitted that they hadn't paid much attention to that yet. They thought that they needed to get the venue locked in first, and then they would start working on the rest of the details once they knew how much the venue would cost. And it makes sense, right? The venue and catering for most couples is going to be the largest component. So why don't you knock that one off the list first and then worry about the rest of it? Let me tell you the story that I shared with her about a past client that was in a very similar situation and how that can really go wrong for you. So this couple came to me right after they had booked their venue and they wanted help pulling the rest of it together. Again, I hear a lot of couples that say like they find the venue, they feel good until they find the venue, and then they're just not quite sure what to do from there. This couple had also used the Knot to break down their budget, and they had found a venue that was at 50% of their overall budget, which was right in line with what the app had suggested, that 40 to 50%. The venue was a country club, and so it included a lot of the things they needed: the food, the cake, the linens, the chairs, the tables. They really just needed the main vendors: photographer, music, a florist, and an officiant to round out their core vendors. So they thought, that should be easy. We can do that with the 50% that's remaining in our budget. So when I started asking them about their priorities and what they pictured for the rest of their wedding, I started to get a little bit nervous. But when I saw her Pinterest board, I knew we were in trouble. Now, yes, they could have been in a great spot from a budget standpoint with the venue they selected. The two big issues that they specifically had, though, were that they, one, were dead set on having a band over a DJ, and two, flowers were a huge priority for her. She had the most gorgeous displays of floral backdrops for their ceremony, pinned over and over again, and just like crazy, lush, beautiful flowers for the entire wedding. Re-looking at their priorities with these things in mind, they really should have been looking for a venue that was going to be closer to like 35% of their budget so that it left room for the band and the flowers. The band is more expensive than a DJ, and of course, the floral budget was going to be more than what the average breakdown was for what she was picturing. So, of course, as it stood, we were going to be significantly over budget if we booked the band and the florals that they wanted. However, the venue contract was signed, so there was no going back at that point. They were in a really difficult spot that they needed to decide, are we going to increase our overall budget, or are we going to sacrifice the things that we would have said were top priorities when we first started planning? Now, this couple was in the process of building their first home. So they opted to put the extra money that they had towards the home and not the wedding. And in the end, we went with a DJ that did provide live music for the ceremony, but they didn't have the band experience for the reception. We also really had to scale back the florals. Although they were still gorgeous, it wasn't close to what she had initially pictured. So she really did have to sacrifice some of the florals to make sure that they didn't completely go way over budget. Now, they still had a gorgeous wedding and everyone had so much fun. They had the best time, but she did admit that if they could start over, they would have picked a different venue so that they could have the band and the flowers that they initially wanted. They would have prioritized that over the venue had they been able to start over again. The good news is, though, I was able to catch my friend's sister before they locked in that venue. Now, that story is still ongoing because we haven't had a chance to sit down yet and go through the priorities and the budget. That's actually happening in a couple of days. And it may work out that the venue they have their eye on is going to be a perfect fit for the rest of their budget and their priorities. Hopefully, we'll get to lock it in soon. But once you start booking with the venue or any of your other vendors, you lose a lot of your flexibility in being able to adjust for your priorities. You run a pretty significant risk that you're going to end up sacrificing something down the road if you don't have this solid understanding beforehand. If this episode was hitting a little too close to home, that's okay. Wedding planning is a lot. And I don't mean for this to sound negative, but again, I'm hoping that I'm catching other couples before they make this super common mistake that happens all the time. And again, most couples are doing this for the first time. So how would you know to do it any differently? But this was also why I built the wedding planning blueprint, to be able to help give you a step-by-step path so that you can make decisions with confidence, knowing that you're not missing anything. You can learn more over at planningcollective.com/membership or find me over on Instagram at planningcollectively. Don't forget that LY. I'd love to help you untangle whatever parts of planning the wedding feels the hardest for you right now or the most overwhelming. And if you found this episode helpful, could you do me a quick favor and take a second to rate and review? It would mean so much to me, and it will help keep other couples from making the mistake of skipping the priority conversation. Thank you so much, and I will see you in the next episode.